Good morning. Today is lesson 13.48, and we are going to go over notes for absolute value inequalities. So in order to do today's lesson, I have to review a few things that we have already learned. So for example, inequality is if I have a less or greater, and we have been using open circle for that graph. If I have less or equal to or greater or equal to, so as soon as you have that second line, that's going to be a solid circle. In addition, we have also studied the statement that's compound statement and a compound statement or. And means one and the other, so that means they are together. So and points in, kind of think of hands holding, hugging yourself, that's your and. So the inequality is going to be less or less or equal to means and. Okay, it's together. And then the graph for the end is together. My solution is all the possible numbers between them. That's your end. Remember when we were doing or, always, or, like oars on a boat, point away from each other. And in or, your inequality is always going to be point out, okay, or equal to, okay. It's always going to be pointing out. So um, let's look at the first example. So it says determine which values make the inequality true. So notice that points in. So if it points in, this is like towards yourself, this is an end. And the way you solve and, you rewrite it with the negative in front. So -2, you copy exactly the same symbol. Whatever it's in absolute value, it's less or equal to 2. So my solution is, because it's less or equal to, it's a solid circle, a -2, solid circle and +2, and you connect. And your solution is all the numbers that are in between. So one more time, when you have an end statement, you put negative in front and you copy the rest. The same inequality sign that you have, okay? Notice when I have point away, arrow goes away, this is your or, okay? And in or, you are going to write to, the first one is going to be copy, and the second one is going to be flip plus negative. So what do I mean by that? Copy is just going to be x is greater or equal to 2. I just copy exactly what I have. And flip and negative is going to be x is less or equal to. Notice that I flipped the sign. And instead of +2, it's going to be -2. So if I'm graphing this solid circle on -2 points away, and solid circle on +2 points away. So my or statement is points away. So in or, one more time, the first one is copy, and the second one is flip and negative. So copy is the first one, and the second one is flip and negative. When it points in, then it's and all you do is you put the negative in front and copy all the rest. Notice that I copied the same symbols. So let's write down the rules. The first thing, you still continue to do the same. You're going to isolate absolute value. So get absolute value alone. On one side. Just like what we have been doing. You're going to get it alone on one side. The second thing you need to decide, it's a decision time. So I say it's decision time because if you have two choices, the first choice is points in, okay, points in, this is end. And if I have an absolute value, so you have a this situation or this one, what you do is you put the number negative comes in front. In front. And copy the rest. Okay. If that's your first scenario. If you have, second scenario is if you have or, means absolute value points away, so greater or equal to, so points away, then you have to, the first one is copy, and the second one is flip plus negative. Okay. So one more time, two scenarios. First scenario, and how do you recognize it? It points in towards your absolute value. And the way you solve, you put the negative in front and you copy the rest. Second scenario is or, and the way you recognize it, if you have the inequality pointing away from the absolute value, the way you set this up, the first one is copy, and the second one is flip and negative. So let's see what this would look like. So the first thing, look at the first example and notice that we need to make a decision. It is by itself, so my absolute value is alone, so I can proceed. The first thing I notice that my arrow is pointing in, so if it's pointing in, it's an and statement. In and statement, what happens is I move the negative in front. So this 2/3 comes in front, becomes negative 2/3. And remember what I said, we copy the rest. So this is the same symbol comes next, same direction, x less or equal to 2/3. And I don't have to do anything else because my x is by itself. So negative 2/3 is smaller than -1, so it's somewhere here. It's a solid circle. Positive 2/3 is somewhere here, and my solution is between because it's an and. I connect them together. Okay, next example, it's also pointing in. So I know that this is an and I have an absolute value by itself, so that means I can proceed. So I proceed by putting -2 in front and copying everything else. Less or equal, still absolute value, 1/3 x plus 1 is less or equal to 2. So notice now that I have once I rewrite it, I should get rid of the absolute value sign. And so notice that now I have 1/3 x plus 1 in the middle, and I have two inequalities on either side. And so now this is the one we solve just like we have been previously, where whatever we do to the middle, we do to the both sides. So -1 on both ends. So I have -3 is less or equal to 1/3x, which is less or equal to 1. And then how would you get rid of the 1/3? Remember, we multiply by 3, but I have to multiply by 3 everything. So now my final answer is -9 is less or equal to x, which is less or equal to 3. And when you graph, you have solid on -9, solid on +3, and we connect, and we shade everything in between because only the numbers in between are my true solutions. Okay, moving on. Notice in the next one I have an absolute value and I have an arrow pointing away, so I know this is my OR. I know that OR is the first equation is copy, so it's going to be x is greater or equal to 1.8, and the second one is going to be flip plus negative, so it's going to be x is less or equal to negative 1.8. I want to emphasize this. So flip and negative. So now when I graph 1.8 greater, so it goes to the right, and negative 1.8 goes to the left. Okay. Okay, let's look at the next one. Notice I have the wall by itself. It's pointing away, so I know that this is an OR. In OR, the first one is copy. So you're going to have 6x plus 9 is greater than 15. And the second one is going to be flip plus negative. So it's going to be 6x plus 9 is now less than negative 15. Again, pay attention to this part because that has to be flip and negative. So now we just solve it like you have solved so far. So minus 9 on both sides. So 6x is greater than 15 minus 9 is 6. And 6 divided by 6 is 1. So x is greater than 1. Or, let's see what we have for the other option, minus 9. So 6x is less than negative 24 divided by 6. X is smaller than negative 4. So negative 4, open circle to the left, and positive 1, open circle to the right. So one more time. Or you rewrite, if you have an absolute value by itself, you rewrite. My first one is copy. The second one is flip and negative. So copy and flip and negative. And all you do is you bring the negative in front and rewrite your equation. Okay. Let's go to more involved problems, and here we're going to have to identify, is it 1, 2, no solution, many, or so forth. So the first one is, one more time, if you have an absolute value of x is equal to negative number, oops, sorry, you can't see this, is no solution. So if absolute value of x is less than negative 2, this would be no solution. Okay, let's get going. So the first one is x is less than 4. So I know that this is pointing in. This is my end. And in end, the negative comes in front. So in this case, my graph would be negative 4, positive 4. And when you're doing the graph, I don't care that you number, you just need to number first and last number and make sure you pay if it's open or closed. And so here I have many solutions. Okay, the next one, notice that my graph is pointing, my arrow is pointing away, that's an OR. So in OR, the first one is copy, so x is greater than 4. And the second one is flip plus negative. So x is less than negative 4. And so my graph is negative 4 open to the left, positive 4 open to the right. And so here again, we have many solutions. B plus 5, so my absolute value is by itself. This is pointing in, so this is an AND statement. And remember, we have negative coming front. Oops, sorry about that. Negative coming front, and I copy the rest. Less than B plus 5 less than 3. And so now, whatever I do to the middle, I need to make sure I do to both ends. So I would subtract 5, and I subtract 5 on both ends. So negative 8 is less than b, which is less than negative 2. And this goes from negative 8 open to negative 2 open. And because this is an AND statement, I connect, and solution is many solutions. Last one on first row, so I'm going to subtract 3 first from both sides. It's an equal sign, so it's 0. And so here my x is equal to 0, and 0 is a solution, which means I only have one solution. Okay, let's look at the next example, and notice that I have my absolute value by itself is less than negative number. And remember, absolute value can never be negative, so I don't have to do anything here. I can just write no solution. So here my answer would be none. Next one, notice that I don't have inequality. I have an equal sign. So is my castle by itself? Yes, it is. So this is the one where you copy, and one is positive and one is negative. So you would have y minus 6 equals to 8, and y minus 6 equals negative 8. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. Y is 14. Add 6 to both sides. Y is negative 2. And here I have only two solutions. Okay, so my graph here is negative 2 and positive 14. Just two dots. No, nothing in between. Okay, next one is I cannot make a decision yet because I do not have an absolute value by itself, so I have to add 5 first. So I have absolute value is greater than 14. Points away, this is my OR. So the first one is greater than 14. The second one is less than negative 14. And because this is an OR, I know that my graph will be pointing away from each other, and you have many solutions. H, sorry. Notice I don't have my absolute value by itself, so the first thing I need to do is isolate the absolute value. I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. And now I'm going to divide by 2. And now notice that I have an equal sign, so I can open my gates, and my first equation is positive 3. Oops, plus 1 equals negative 3, so subtract 1, x is 2, and x is negative 4. And if I do the number line, negative 4 number, positive 2 number, and you only have two solutions. Okay? Nothing in between. Okay, last problem. You're going to have a problem like this on the test, and a lot of students get confused, so I want to make sure you understand what they want you to do. Solve each of the following inequalities. So you have to solve each one of them. You can't just give me one answer. You have to solve each one. And then you identify which inequality could be represented by the graph. So solve each one, and then you look at the graph and see which one matches. So the first thing is, in the first one, I know this is going to be an AND. And in AND, you have negative goes in front. So it's going to be negative 8 less or equal to x plus 2 less or equal to 8. So this is the one that whatever you do to the middle, you need to do to both ends. So you're going to subtract 2, and you have negative 10 is less or equal to x, which is less or equal to 6. So this is my first answer. Okay. Now we're going to look at the second one, and notice I have an OR statement, and the way you solve OR, you solve each one individually. So we're going to subtract 6 first. So you have negative x is less or equal to negative 6. And because you have negative 1 in front, that's same as if I had invisible negative 1. This is multiplication. So if I divide by negative number, that means I need to flip the sign. So in this case, it's going to be x is going to be greater or equal to positive 6, or here I'm going to add 1 to both sides, so 2x is less or equal to negative 20, divide by 2, and I have sx is less or equal to negative 10. So this is my answer for the second one. And we are going to do the third one. So that is whatever I do to the middle, I'm going to do to both ends. So minus 5 first to both sides. So you have negative 30 is less or equal to 3x, which is less or equal to 23 minus 5 is 18. Now I divide by 3. And so I have negative 10 is less or equal to x, which is less or equal to 6. So you have a decision to make. First of all, now that I solved each one, I can look at the graph, and I know that this is an end graph. So which answer can I automatically eliminate? My OR graph. Okay, so I can eliminate 2. And if I look at my first, it's negative 10 to 6, negative 10 to positive 6, solid circle, negative 10 to positive 6, solid circle. So my answers are 2 of them, which is what? 1 and 3. So my answer is 1 and 3. Okay, so that's it. You guys are done with the lesson. Go ahead and start on the homework, and good luck. Watch again if you need to review the procedures. Thank you.